Suikoden is not a game easily accessible through legitimate means. Both PlayStation versions cost an arm and a leg, and the PSP remaster never got an English release, so all you're left with is the PlayStation Network version, which is only playable on the PS3, PSP, and maybe the Vita, but they're all retro systems. I don't even know if you can still buy it. Sega Saturn? What's that? Look, we don't have time to be gaslit about whether or not Saturn's real, because now we've got the Suikoden HD Remaster. It's just a shame they kinda fumbled what should have been an easy catch. The initial bout of coverage from soy-faced YouTubers was embarrassing. These people are bought and paid salesmen who did little more than read the back of the box. Minor editions were oversold or kept vague to sound like a positive change, and certain people just made up a bunch of shit and ran with it. I'm not naming names because it's pretty much every video and article I've seen to varying degrees, but you're all lazy shills and you disgust me to my core as you enrich yourself off the trust of the common man. Anyway, despite what I'm about to say, the remaster still has inherent value as it's now able to be played easily and legitimately and won't set you back a lot of money. It's not a remaster for the sake of remastering. This one makes functional sense, and functionally, it's unchanged. The HD version presents its raw form, unhindered by modern attempts to update or balance it, and that's not bad. At its core, the games we know and love are there, with a few major bug fixes, though from what I've been reading, some minor ones persist and some novel ones exist. These games are great, whatever form they're in. If you haven't played them before, I'm gonna rip through each and spoil some big moments, so now is the time to stop watching. Go on, get on, get on! Get on, boy, get on! This video will be focused on the little things, the vanity, as that's the core goal of the HD remaster, and despite their mission statement promising an equitable glow-up, one game ended up looking far worse than the other. To the point where it doesn't even look like the same development team worked on both, so what's going on? I may not be able to answer these questions in a satisfactory manner, but let's at least take a squiz at the end result, see if we can't make some guesses, and suss out what we expect from something like this. We'll compare what we were given Suikoden to what we got Suiko now, starting with the second title as it's arguably the better remake of the two, and I like it more. I was immediately skeptical when I saw the quality of the backgrounds. They're modernized to a bland degree. While they vaguely resemble their original counterparts, there's plenty of world-building elements lost in the overly bright, shiny detail they've added. For example, we'll start with the Mercenary Fortress. Here we see Ryo standing between the fences, and the original has this real stitched-together feeling, like a bunch of amateur builders made do with what basic knowledge and skills they had available. You've either got bamboo or thin sticks roped together, all of mismatched sizes, and despite there only being two alternating tiles for the front view, they're made to look as though they're barely standing. It looks like I built it. This is far less conspicuous than the newer version, which consists of perfectly squared logs cut to almost the exact size and buried so close to one another their placement would have had to have been intentionally engineered. You know, trenches dug, math performed, some high-level effort versus just shoving some bamboo in the ground and tying it together. We're given the impression that these mercenaries are tough, but not necessarily collected or skilled. They're formidable, but are they perfectly shaved logs in the ground formidable? That's never the impression the game gives, and while their hideout is well built, and while they confess to receiving support from the city of Muse, I don't know, the original vibe details more of the warrior's core traits. Consider the mercenary flag, the lion that Victor proudly confesses to creating, which looks bad and everybody criticizes him for. It's a bit of a running joke, but they still willingly rally behind it. They're not fancy, and what they do isn't pretty, but they're concerned with the bigger picture. The fact that they have a recognizable banner is more important than it looking well crafted. To demonstrate this, look no further than the well inside the compound. The original's covered with straw, likely propped up by a loose wooden frame, with the well itself consisting of uneven stones, a makeshift creation from readily available resources. It's a more appropriate look to blend with what already exists and what we know about the mercenary group. The remaster comes at us with a completely different vibe. It's got these pristine planks nailed into the beams at the perfect angle to bounce a consistent sheen off the lacquer, with the well itself constructed from masoned bricks. If this were in my yard, I'd brag about it. I'd be like, hey John, you want to see my well again? I can see what they were going for, as this is based on the original concept art. They weren't attempting to fix the game or claim they know better. It was a genuine attempt to stick to the original concept, but I liked the PS1 version better. The cleaner variant sends the wrong message about who Flick and Victor are. These are not men who are skilled in masonry, nor are they men who ask someone to build them a finely crafted, pristine well. These are blokes who grab a couple wannabe heroes from some boring-ass town and make them build a well with whatever they can find. Even if some of these warriors-to-be were skilled carpenters or masons, their work is excessive. These boys literally hunkered down in a sewer in the former game. They are not fancy. The artists could have matched the modern look in the original had they wanted. Suikoden II is home to some of the best environmental design and pixel art on the PlayStation. There were very clearly talented hands-on staff, but they didn't. They opted for a rougher look, something rapidly assembled for purpose, not specifically engineered for vanity or longevity. We often see deviations made to concept art for all sorts of reasons. The horizontal redesign of Cloud of Darkness from Final Fantasy III is a famous example, and I'm not saying it was well thought out. It may have simply been easier to reuse the tiles found on the fortress, but I am saying that it fits better. These two images portray an entirely different environment and world, and by extension, rework existing characters in ways that, in my opinion, should never be broached. They are fundamentally different. Yes, I am saying I know better than the people who made the game. Oh god. I will say, I do like the moss on the fortress roof and the surrounding dense foliage, even if the assets are a little too clean, but it does blend pretty well. Though there are some mixed signals thrown, as it's a little overgrown for how fastidious the rest of the revised encampment is. You're telling me they got a dude to build the perfect well, landscapers, carpenters, an engineer, but no gardener? You might say they used the foliage to enshroud and protect their encampment, and while that could be true, it was constructed during a time of peace. Despite their foresight to the contrary, there's no need for guerrilla tactics, and given their influence and notoriety, there's little chance of their location being a secret. Luca Blight even confesses to it being an obstacle to his plan, which is why he takes it in the early game, and why Kiba later sacrificing himself in an attempt to reclaim the territory was a legitimate distraction. It's prime real estate. Now look, come over here. Come over here. The fuck? Come over here. Am I over-scrutinizing minor elements that don't matter? Yes, but if I can write this much about how some careless additions change the whole feel of a map, and then by extension the characters who occupy it, what can we say of the rest of the title? We can say that many elements look bad, because they do, and I'm not saying the original assets in Suikoden II were perfect. Some of these trees look downright awful, but the point of a background is that it's not supposed to stick out. Every element should blend into its environment and serve as if it belongs, and not noticing these things is a sign that the background artist did their job very well. Or it could be that you are not paying attention. It's honestly a pretty vast duality. It's hard not to notice them in the Suikoden II remaster, as they're so clean and smooth, ripped straight out of the IKEA equivalent of a modern asset catalogue, but there may be something a little more sinister lurking beneath the surface. I'll give you an example. Pause your goon material for a sec and look at this. Just let me borrow one moment of your time, please. Is this chunk of background from RPG Maker or Suikoden HD? Alright, time's up. It's RPG Maker VX. It's not a trick question, it's a genuine assessment of quality. I gave you both potential options. And you may have even gotten it correct, or maybe you recognized it, but if you can't definitively tell these two apart, a remaster of one of the greatest PS1 games versus a stock background asset in an outdated piece of software that produces generic-looking results, we have issues.
Hey, you.
I love using Final Fantasy IV as an example of anything. If you go back through my video catalog, you'll probably find it in like every second video. So let's use it here and do a quick test. Which side of this screenshot is from the Super Nintendo and which side is from the PlayStation? There's little difference, they look the same. You might pick up on these slight color differences and peg the one on the right as the Super Nintendo version with its tighter palette, and you'd be right. But functionally, they're identical because the PS1 version was a port, it wasn't a remake, nor was it a remaster. Now, here's that same version against the PSP remake. It's night and day, you would have no issue distinguishing these. Granted, these are, 17 years apart, 3.5 console generations? Whether you like the new look or not, we can agree that it would not be achievable on the Super Nintendo hardware, and that it looks distinctly different. Now, to be fair to Suikoden HD, RPG Maker VX came out 17 years before. Oh no, how embarrassing. I posed the same question to my YouTube community feed, RPG Maker or Suikoden HD, and all 5 responses said Suikoden HD. I don't know if you guys are shitposting, but all 5 of you confirmed my biases, so thank you. I will say, despite Suikoden HD's bland nature, plenty of the assets blend fine. You would hardly notice if you weren't going in with the intent to look at them as they distort in the breeze. But then there's this shit. Looking at the storage room in the castle, you got a bunch of crates and barrels behind a door, they're whatever, but look at the insignia on the door. Well, I say insignia, but I don't know if it's an eye hole or an asshole. It's so lopsided and blurry. Was it meant to be a star originally and then upscaled and all the sharp edges were filed straight off it? I guess we'll never know. Unless we go back to the original, which is not something you should have to do, and it's a door knocker on the inside of a storage room. Look, I've already said Suikoden II isn't perfect, but it certainly looked better when you could tell what things were. Also, the doors look like shit now. All their features are blurry and ill-defined. To the north of the same room, we see a bunch of crate assets which aren't even aligned correctly. They overlap one another, covering the edges and lids, but are on the same axis, so I don't even think it's a perspective issue, and it's certainly not present in the original. At least not in this particular spot. We can see a similar thing here in the Mercenary Fortress during our daring escape, though honestly looking at it now, that could simply be a perspective issue with the upper boxes actually being below the middle boxes, making it look like a layering issue. Either way, it's a graphical anomaly in a PS1 game. Surely with the power of hindsight, the HD Remaster would correct these issues and avoid repeating them. And you're probably thinking, are we gonna hyperfixate on every piece of junk that litters the map? My god, no. I would much rather gaze upon Victor's beautiful face. If only he had one. After washing up on the shore, we're first exposed to the bear's portrait, and he has been fully bogged. Dude's looking like Klungo from Banjo-Kazooie. He's got that little eye, all his features are exaggerated and look unnatural, like an in-between from a Disney movie. If you compare it to his old portrait, his cheekbones are prominent, but not cartoonishly so, with his chin being rounder. His profile is entirely different, but more naturally masculine. His new look is completely plastic. That eye is a joke and looks so goofy and pig-nosed. I tried to fix him, it's a bit rough, but if I can do this in Photoshop in 5 minutes, imagine what a talented artist could do in 5 minutes. You know, you'd have him looking presentable. Delving a bit deeper, this is another adherence to the original concept art, as Victor has much sharper features than in-game. I'm also not a fan of the angular design. He looks blown full of Botox and fillers, but at least in the original art, his skin pigment is brown, like he's seen the sunlight, like a hardened warrior, and his eye looks intentionally squinted. Whereas the newer art is so smooth and pale, he just looks like Michael Jackson with a bung eye. The hair in the original is unkempt, unclean. He's a warrior, but the new variant has it perfectly washed and blown. He's had the hair guys come in before his portrait shoot. Also, he's got forked eyebrows now. The profile looks wrong. It's a combination of many small details that give him a ghoulish, uncanny appearance. Nothing specifically is wrong, yet at the same time, everything is. Awaking on the shore, we can already see some more charm has been washed away. While I don't think the new scene has anything wrong with it, the old scene has these sick animations for water, where the submarine layer's darkened and the edges of the rocks have an animation to simulate flowing water bouncing off them. It's a little more subtle, you've got to use your imagination a bit, but it is a great effect. Does the new effect look bad? No, it's fine, but it's lacking the simple charm of the original, where the water is alluded to instead of being emulated with some sort of displacement and ripple effect. In the original, Pol, the inventory manager, gives you a full list of items to collect before you head off to sort them, but in the remake, he only tells you to get the boots. Speaking to him a second time reveals the entire list, which is confusing as he says it like it's being reiterated, but it was never iterated. It's an odd change. And then if you get the boots and the flint and speak to him, he says, "Oh, where's the flour? But you never asked for flour. Like, we're just back from collecting boots. What the fuck are you talking about?" Did they think listing off 3 items was too complex for the modern audience? They should have just drawn some fucking yellow paint to them, would have been fine. Man, come on, the Peppa Pig game trusts toddlers with 6 items at once? Why would you do this?
He left his big, black pirate hat.
And the patch on his left eye.
And his golden hook too.
And his black boots.
And a strand of his red beard.
The load times are similar, occasionally the HD version edges out a win, and to my surprise, the PS1 will load quicker in some instances, though this is the Switch version and is usually a fraction of a second in either direction. I just wanted to point it out as I'm astounded that anything on the PS1 loads as well as anything not on the PS1. The PC version, however, is instant when running off a solid state with nearly decade-old hardware, so the comparable load times are likely just a Switch issue, maybe the PS4. I don't want to buy another copy to test it. Hitting up the Mist Monster and the way he funnels in has changed. Obviously, with access to more processing power, it paved the way for more particle effects, and they employed that route for the newer, shinier version, but I don't know, the old one just looks better. It has a cooler effect and like anamorphs into his shape from the mist. The wind that flows around him was also more distinct, where the newer one is a bit more subtle. It doesn't really matter, I just thought I would kind of point at it. When the Mist Monster shifts from his beast to his female form, there's a real nice diffusion which consists of well done transition sprites, and the newer version uses the same visuals. However, because everything's so bright, the edges are impacted and she looks like a cutout, where due to the darker tone of the original, she blends a little bit better. There's always going to be a cutout look when you've got 2D sprites on a 3D plane. This is especially true of modern monitors, but when they also have a white outline, it looks cheap, whether intentional or not. Their death animations are also distinct, but they both look fine in their own right. The plateau wherein you battle the mist has also fundamentally changed. Where the older version had sparse foliage, the new one is void of it entirely. I get what they were going for, as in the newer version, the higher up you travel, the less you see green, until the tippy top where it's dead trees and infertile soil, but that equally sends a mixed message. The original having stray patches of grass implies a lack of movement. There are so few travelers that grass is given a chance to grow in what seems like quite the desolate position. Given that a mist monster lives there and is scaring away movement, no less with the mountain shifting hands in who has control over it, we're likely to see reduced traffic. Also, I guess the mist itself probably blocks a lot of light, but having it be completely empty makes it feel like a crafted boss arena instead of a terrain that the monster ambushes the party on. Reading all this back, it seems like such a nothing criticism, but it's all compounding, like we're building to something greater. I hope. The scene where Nanami exits the house and smashes Ryo into the wall so hard he leaves an indent is slightly worse. Not only is the indent super clean and there's little in the way of cracks around the smoother body outline, but the sound effects don't convey the weight of, being forced through solid rock. Following the fight with the troops, Nanami berates Ryo for ignoring his training in the original, which was changed to her accusing her brother of skipping workouts. But this changes the entire intent of the sentence, as speaking of their training, the same training we see them partake in with Genkaku at the flashback in the beginning, points to something we know about the characters. They're trained in combat or some form of martial arts by their grandfather. They participated in training, and in his death, their ideals were to keep at it and further that same training. To ignore that, you're actively neglecting it and refusing the principles associated. There are heavier implications, but skipping workouts, it's so vague. Like, if I skip a workout, it's not a huge issue. I'll pick it up next time. But to ignore your training is to deny the lessons and principles associated. I am literally skipping a workout right now to record this script. I'm not a martial artist. Or so I'd have you believe. You can draw the same intent from each. Ryo is sloppy, he hasn't been keeping the heat on himself, and his combat prowess is lacking as a result. I know it's a nitpick, but why change it at all? It conveyed exactly what it needed to, and I would argue that it no longer does. Whatever, let's keep moving forward. If I get hung up on minor phrasing in this 30-hour game, we're gonna be here forever. Okay, I lied. The next sentence is way worse. Raud walks up and is all, please don't make this any harder than it has to be. Do it as a favor to your old commanding officer. Do what? The last sentence is an odd inclusion, as in the original, he prefaces it by explicitly asking Ryo to come along quietly. So it makes sense that he'd follow up asking for a favor by acknowledging his position. The new version sends mixed signals, not due to what it says. We can infer what the favor is, but due to the fact that you just fought dudes with spears and bows. Does he want us to surrender peacefully, or does he want to kill us? I'm not going to pretend Suikoden II had the best translation. There's a lot of questionable lines, so for the sake of fairness, I'll show an inverse scenario where the original was laughably bad and the remake did actually make it better. When Victor and Flick are saving Ryo and Joey from the hanging platform, in the original, Victor says, "You shouldn't have run off like you did. I was so surprised." Yeah, careful bro, don't oversell your emotions, you'll malfunction. The remake replaces this with, you know, your kids really threw me for a loop running away like that. Is it perfect? No, but it's a hell of a step up in terms of writing quality. It conveys the casual character of Victor, who is not a computer. Victor originally makes 2 references to himself being old and his body feeling like lead, but they're absent in the HD version. It's weird, strange removals, like they indicate that the times have been relatively peaceful since the Succession War in the first game. Pillica is also no longer in grug mode, referring to herself with her own name, and she uses proper English as children with standard IQs do. This is another fine change and might have just been a weird holdover from the original Brapanese translation where she would actually refer to herself with her own name. I'm not going to highlight any more text, I think you get the point. There's a shift, it's minor, but it's there. Sometimes it's understandable and an improvement, sometimes it changes the entire meaning and implication of sentences. It's hit and miss. Now it's time for some real shit, let's gaze upon some more profiles. When I got to Hannah and Toto, I was like, where is this bitch looking? Let's fix that up. Yeah, there we go. It's one of those things where I wasn't sure if they'd used a tool to upscale the art, but after playing Suikoden I, which to my understanding is completely redrawn by the original artist, you go back to the second game and you can clearly see it. Hannah's not the only one who got botched. There's Vicky, whose eyes teleported in different directions, Tuta, who needs some glaucoma medicine because he's got pressure-induced nerve paralysis, and who could forget my boy, Hoy, who looks like someone's grabbed his right eyelid and stretched it out. This was clearly meant to be the right side of his eye in the original, but whatever tool they've used to upscale it has interpreted it as lid, so now he's got this floppy-ass skin hanging down. Even if this were intentional, it still looks amateurish. I don't know how they didn't fix that. Grandia too looks like he's spacing out, his eyes look in different directions. The portraits are also not framed like the original, where they had outlines and fit into very specific boxes above the text. The new version has them just carelessly thrown in there, with their heads on full display, except for like the top 10% or so. If you're not going to fit them into a predefined space, why are their heads cut off? There's plenty of screen to go around. Outside of the eye direction, they look pretty good, and I guess here is where I drop the accusation. I'm pretty sure this is the result of AI upscaling. I'm not confident enough to say it definitively, and that it's not just a questionable upscaling tool or algorithm, though really, what's the difference? If all you're doing is upscaling your original art with an algorithm to make it look passable at a higher resolution, I'm not gonna double beat you too hard, but it would be nice if the minor imperfections were hand corrected as seen in my own expert recreations. That's not even mentioning the soft flow where everything looks overly smooth and perfect, which isn't exclusively a quality of AI, but it's certainly a red flag. I've attempted to use AI tools myself to upscale low-res game art and assets for videos or thumbnails, and it rarely lines the eyes up perfectly. It'll interpret the iris in unintended places or make them look overly shiny and smooth. I was initially hoping they could have rescanned the original art or even traced it, but the fact that the new face tiles line up perfectly with the old art, despite not being the old art, is pretty concrete. This is one area where I appreciate AI's utility. It's very difficult to make PS1 assets and cutscenes look good above their native resolution. I should know, I've thrown thousands and thousands of dollars attempting, and it never really works. Chucking them into an algorithm generally improves fidelity. It performs a task that is otherwise next to impossible, and does a passable job at preserving the look. We do have some odd discrepancies. There are characters whose art doesn't quite line up, like Tuta's ear has been raised, but the rest of him looks exactly the same. It's a bizarre situation to be sure, and again, I don't want to say they used AI, especially knowing how rabid some people get about the topic, but it is looking quite likely. Hey, I just found another one. Look at Humphrey's eyebrow blending into his eyeball. A handmade change that I wasn't too fond of was the intro cutscene, in that Luca Blight's eyes look in the wrong direction. The original had him stood atop a pile of bodies and swinging around and staring down, implying someone was below him, possibly the player. The new one has him looking to the side, but I don't know what he'd be looking at, as he's on a large pile of corpses. This is another change that adheres to the original concept art. You can see it here, he's looking to the side, but he clearly looks down in the original cutscenes, and based on the angle of the camera, which is presumably either someone's perspective or to make him appear more intimidating, it makes more sense. As far as I can tell, the 3D in the opening is new, but it looks passable. It captures that empty PS1 vibe. A few shots are different, but it's not a huge issue, and the upscaled character art flies past fast enough that it's hard to catch their eye. The pre-rendered cutscenes are a mixed bag. The first, where Luca's army destroys Ryubei Village, is exactly the same, just upscaled. The next one, where they're escaping through the forest from the burning mercenary fortress, is totally different. The trees, the bobbing of the camera, the length of the shots, the fortress itself is animated differently, but I did notice it still has the fence in the style of the first game. The only thing that's slightly off is the shot with the three silhouettes running to the left. These are very similar models, if not the same, and their animations are jerky. This is possibly an effect of rendering the cutscene at 30 frames per second when the original was likely in 15. Who knows? The Necklord introduction looks like it was lovingly recreated. I wouldn't say it's missing anything, but it has some distinct differences, so we know it wasn't just upscaled. The scene where the Beast Rune spirits everyone in Muse away is definitely upscaled, but they slapped a different effect on top with a darker cloud of, beast juice as it wisps everybody into the sky. You can see little anomalies on the smaller details, likely due to it trying to interpret the pixelation of the original, but everything else is identical, outside of the top and bottom being cut off due to the changed aspect ratio. From here, we don't get another cutscene until Tinto, where they give this throwaway rock golem boss a flashy introduction. This is another cutscene that's been redone, different camera angles, the model looks different, but it does keep the spirit. The next is a burning flag, which is upscaled, as is the final cutscene of the Beast Rune manifesting into existence. Outside of the mild pixelation, they look pretty good, and are maybe 50 total seconds of a 30+ hour game. And thinking of it now, the pixelation may be due to the low resolution of the Switch. This may not be your experience on other platforms. All this tells me that they didn't have access to the original assets and have used the end product, and honestly, whatever tool they used did a pretty good job. Would I have preferred all the cutscenes manually remodeled and re-rendered? Not really. I like the old ones, I like the new ones, and it all blends pretty well. Like, why reinvent the wheel when a robot can smooth it out and call it a day? What doesn't blend is the world map, which stinks. The original was 2D, so everything was cut into place intentionally. How you saw it was how it was supposed to be seen, but the new world map is 3D, the modeling is rough, and the textures warp depending on where they are on the screen, giving it a weird, disorienting appearance. I will give it to them, it's neat how they've used the 3D environment to make some of the assets such as walls and towns change perspective as you move past and around them, but I don't know, the combo of the overuse of bloom, the weird smoothed out, possibly AI generated textures, it looks and feels bad. There's absolutely none of the character found in the original. Does this cliff look like a cliff? Not really. Battle scenes have changed, as in the original there'd be a separate plane for the floor and a background that rotated to simulate a full environment. This old style relied a lot more on black space to cover the shortcomings, to hide the seams, so to speak, and I enjoy the use of black to make the foreground seem more striking. That said, I have no issue with the modern battle scenes, which are full 3D environments. They serve the same purpose, and while I personally prefer the older style, I don't think the new one detracts at all. As a final note for Suikoden II, I'm going to overlay some of the original maps with some of the newer maps, as I suspect AI may have had a hand here too. With how well they fit into the exact mold and how ill-defined and smooth they are, it's really anyone's guess. Whether they recreated assets and manually reassembled them to line up perfectly, or slapped them in an algorithm, we may never know, but you can make up your own mind. Okay, let's talk about the first title. From what I can tell, the art for the first Suikoden Remaster is entirely new. I'm just going off what we've been told, and I've found nothing to contradict that. While I don't like the generic anime style, it's got a much more broad, modern appeal than Suikoden's original art. I definitely see what they were going for. I still adore the OG though, it's so unconventional, borderline ugly, it's bold, it's iconic, it gives the first game such personality, and here we get really clean, bright, modern anime visuals with digital coloring. I don't like that as much, it lacks detail, everyone's smooth and baby-faced. Yoshitaka Amano's art from the Final Fantasy series was always odd, it was viscerally unnerving, ugly in a way, but that was the point. And despite being off-putting at first, it'd grow on you. There was clearly a unique mastery to his works, and their adaptations in-game were quite accurate, giving Final Fantasy a look unlike much else. The success of the JRPG franchise was a combination of many things, but to say Amano's art didn't at least play a small part would be a disservice to its success. Okay, that's the third Final Fantasy comparison. I am so buck-broken by Square, it's sad, it's pathetic. The original Suikoden shared a similar fate. It had a style all its own, which is what initially drew me to the series, and I fear with this cleaner iteration, that draw will be lost. Though recommending and discovering games has fundamentally changed in the past 30 years, so maybe that's not even a concern, and I should focus on hating the new style purely from a visual perspective. Well, let's begin. The bridge to the castle speaks for itself. It looks like tanned leather. Bro, what the fuck were they thinking? The original looks walked on, old, like a thoroughfare. It's miscolored, faded, there's shadow, there's texture. There's a good fucking leather bridge. Tyr's house had busted old steps with cracks and nicks, but the new stairs are pristine, untarnished by warriors rushing to the dinner table. The older, imperfect design speaks to the former state of Gregminster. The new design speaks to clean, high-resolution asset design. They also lack the railing shadows, so we're presuming they have none. Maybe the Empire isn't evil, maybe Ted just fell down the stairs and the guards rushed over to help him. These doors are questionable too. Like, are these viewing windows into the bedrooms? What's wrong with the plain old wooden door? Like, bro, you know I'm peeping on Cleo, try to stop me. In the remaster's favour, the lighting looks better and makes more sense as it gently glides through the front windows and door, but much like most titles, the bloom is taken to extremes, which, we'll come back to. Crossing the leather bridge again, this is one area in particular which looked genuinely horrible in the original. It looked like Missing No, where the new visuals just look flat better. I still don't like the style, but there's no denying this was a bad tile in need of a replacement. The internals of the castle are better in some ways, the tiles are skewed correctly for the perspective, and the tops of the walls are fully black now, as you can no longer see the outside from the inside. The carpet's all kicked up and has random shadows on it, and the pattern's cool, but all the walls have the same shadows going in the same directions, despite the rooms being internally lit, which would shift the shade. If you look at the room just to the right here, there's a light to the right of the armor, but the shadow is pointing the same direction as is the wall. When meeting with Futch, the speed of the dragon is also comparatively slower, and there are no foreground clouds. It doesn't present the same urgency as the original. These are minor issues, but this is supposed to be a definitive remaster with the full power of hindsight, and it feels like minimal care was given to a supposedly full visual do-over. I can overlook all this, I'm a big man, I can ignore some minor issues, but what I can't forgive is functional ones, such as the forest on Leknut's Island. They've turned it from, admittedly, a strange-looking bushy path to a functional nightmare. This path in the first title had dark green bushy overgrowth, you can't walk on them, and it's made clear with some harsh visual contrast to the actual path. In the remake, these have been refitted into regular grass and blend with the rest of the environment. There is little distinction between what is and is not walkable. The soft greens and browns blend together, and it's entirely flat like the rest of the ground. Like, what is stopping me from walking over this? Whether it looks better or not isn't the point anymore, it's function over form. It has to work before it can look good, and here it does neither. Atop the path, Leknut's castle originally had some age and mystery to it. It was textured, gritty, but the remade version looks like a shopping centre. The top room is meant to be enshrouded visually to convey the lengths gone to in order to hide from Windy. The windows are covered, it feels run down, feels dingy. The revised version is open, breathable, bright. If I were a realtor, I could move this place easy. It was an odd vibe shift. I wonder if it was done to show off the bloom or just another careless addition. The world map suffers the same fate as Suikoden II, but we've lost even more here. The sprite that moved around had this bobby head with his hair having a gentle smoothness to it as he strode, which was replaced with a two-frame, bare-bones, bounceless abomination. The spring is gone from his step, his faith depleted, he is a symptom of his own ills. Compare these two sprites and tell me there's been any love put into the new one. You can't. In certain towns, the roofs are missing their knobs. I don't know what you call these things, and despite the original being quite plain, the newly added details such as crumbling walls and windows with glass make houses far more generic looking. Beneath the knobless town, the water does actually look better, as the original Suikoden had a really rough idea of what water was and just kinda darkened and jiggled the area with a nasty texture beneath, killing the entire feel. While it is quite bleak so far, Suikoden I HD avoids most face issues. Since they're redrawn, they largely look fine, but whatever they did to Taiho's face was a big mistake. It was intentional too, he's supposed to look like that. We can't blame AI or upscaling, this was redrawn. They murdered this man's legacy. Skipping ahead to the end of the game, we arrive at Joseph's Dragon Den, which is so blown out from bloom. The characters glow, like, is this a joke? It's an insult to these tools which people can manipulate to make vibrant, stunning scenery, to simply slap it over the top of sprites you didn't create and call it a day. I get what they're trying to do, but it's soulless, it's flat. A smarter man would change the sprite itself and not simply project his flaws upon it. Or, just not overdo the bloom. The opening cutscene is different from the PlayStation version, but don't let that fool you, it's actually a recreation of the Saturn opening. This seems to be largely original, though some of the matching background art of generic soldiers and the like was probably upscaled for use. Outside of that, it seems to feature new 3D assets designed to be intentionally low poly. I see no signs of AI here, the little flourishes and attention to detail defy that. Not to mention, a lot of the 3D shots have different camera angles, which could only be redone by building these scenes in a 3D environment. Short of a few dragons and some generic 3D soldiers, it's faithful and looks great. Now that I've embarrassed myself talking about form, because let's face it, I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, let's talk about function. Diagonal movement is present in this version, but that was lifted from the PSP version, so the major updates are really only the UI design, hard mode, a standalone button for quick auto battle selection, and the in-battle speed up. I intentionally left out running from that list because while it is a new addition, there's something a little off about it. The original Suikoden's walk speed is quite fast, so fast in fact that I didn't feel slow moving around. It felt quite generous, and having played the original Suikoden right after the sequel, and also after the HD version, I wouldn't say I missed the run function, nor that it needed one. You can carry Stallion in the party, and with his holy rune, you move much faster, and it works like a run function. It seems to be about twice the walk speed, but Stallion is such a shit character with his wasted rune slot, like why bother? When I played the remake, I noticed that the walk speed was oddly slow. It felt way worse than the original, so I timed it against the PSP version, and wouldn't you know it, they halved the speed. Moving from the right wall in Gregminster Castle, the walk speed was 17 seconds, with the run speed being 6. But the crazy part is, the standard movement in the PSP version only took 8 seconds. I checked the time for the PS1 version, and wouldn't you know it, 8 seconds as well. So the run speed is 1.2 times faster when it didn't really need to be, and the walk speed is 2 times slower when it really didn't need to be. Just baffling additions. They did give Tyr a run animation, which was cool to see, but it all feels so hollow now. To demonstrate how hard they leaned on the PSP version, in the beginning when Tio trails the hero, you're unable to move diagonally or run, as they likely didn't make a sprite for him in the PSP version, so it would look weird, and they certainly didn't add that here. I've skimmed through a good couple hours of dialogue and didn't notice anything quite as iffy as Suikoden II. Most dialogue reads like they used a thesaurus to buff the lines up a bit, but there was nothing quite as egregious. That said, I didn't do a super thorough job. Now, I've got some light general criticisms of both titles to cap off the video. Did Suikoden need a redraw? Not necessarily, but it did need something, as the original in-game assets were low res and some textures are genuinely ugly, way uglier than the remaster ended up. I'd wager they don't have access to the source files, and there's a good chance that comes along with original concept art, or at least high-res scans of it, but I still think it all looks a bit wonky. With that said, it's honestly better than any other upscaling attempt I've ever seen, even if Hannah can see two directions at once. It's easy to say they should have paid people to redo the art when you're not spending your money soft rebooting a niche property from 30 years ago. Oh god, that hurt. And the amount Konami dedicated to the process is unknown, so however they did it is likely what made it feasible. The original art is exceptional, it's unmatched, but we've already got it at home. It just needed to be bigger, which is technically what happened, I guess. I've also seen a few people question why they kept the original sprites and only updated the backgrounds, and there's a very simple answer. Look at the backgrounds, and then look at the quality of the original sprites. They knew they couldn't do any better, so they didn't. There's absolutely nothing wrong with knowing your own limits and curtailing expectations, but then, that argument kind of flies out the window when you're charging people $50 for entry. Both Chrono Trigger and Grandia had force-filtered sprites in their latest re-release, and people were unhappy about it, so Chrono Trigger was fixed, and Grandia stayed a blurry mess, even though you can delete a file in the PC version to make them crispy again. There was likely a project lead who knew that if they screwed up the characters of Suikoden, they would be heavily and rightfully criticized, so they simply opted not to. Some of the old backgrounds in Suikoden, particularly the 3D ones, had a similar disconnect to the sprites, but artistically, it's a style I adore. You see it in titles like Breath of Fire's 3 and 4, Final Fantasy Tactics, and some of the best looking games on the PS1. Even though how the sprites ended up was clearly the best option, it's still a perfectly valid criticism to say they look too crispy for the environment that they're in. If we're promised a remaster and the sprites are identical to the PSP version, then you didn't remaster them at all, though they were always transparent about it and made it evident, so I would say it's a non-issue. That said, some in-game filters might have gone a long way for people who are into blurry sprites. Hard mode was an unexpected inclusion though. The OG games are pretty easy, and from what I can see, it gives enemies about a 20% health boost. It's a cheap way to pad some bosses, but one of the major issues with Suikoden's difficulty is how fast foes fall. They barely get a chance to attack, so while it doesn't go as far as a proper hard mode should, it fared better than most. It would have been nice to see some more personalized options to make the experience even tougher, maybe a mode that reduces level gains or money yield, or perhaps even less access to magic charges just to push the player a bit more. Maybe the hard mode could tweak regular mobs to complement their allies' weaknesses just to introduce a little thought to the average battle, but then I guess an invested player can apply lots of handicaps to themselves anyway, so it's a non-issue. Why they added an easier mode is beyond me. Most fights in the game are won in a single turn or can be easily auto-battled, and magic spam will take care of pretty much any boss. Not to mention the weird addition of giving you a fortune rune and like 60,000 poch to start. If you want to play Suikoden without suffering, you can't because the story will make you suffer, but just watch it on YouTube. The standalone button for auto battle saves 3 other button presses. It's not a huge addition, but still convenient. The in-battle speed up is fine, but largely unnecessary, as Suikoden has always moved at rapid fire pace in combat, with fellas taking their turn at the same time. I guess it's useful if you're sick of seeing the same magic animations over and over, particularly towards the end of the game, but given that it deactivates itself after every battle, I would question its inclusion. I only used it a handful of times myself. If I didn't have to play each game twice, and then recapture a shitload of footage during editing, I would probably not have used it at all. Yeah bro, I love Suikoden II so much, the only thing that would make it better is if I could skip half the game. Yeah man, if I don't get like instantly gratified every 10 seconds, my skin starts to get itchy and I have like a tantrum, and then I hit my mum. There are 2 tiers of in-battle speed up. The first is unlocked from the start, but the second elevated speed level unlocks upon acquiring Stallion, which is a really cool in-universe justification for it. The only major localization changes I noticed was native costume became traditional clothes, which, stupid change, but such are the times. Even if a better translation is clothes over costume, it's really just a semantic difference over a pointless change, and will initially confuse veterans, which is a bulk of your target demographic. In a similar vein, the blood was toned down and the characters don't smoke anymore, which I didn't personally notice, but that is a baffling change. If it was cool in the 90s and we're a far more adult medium now, or so everybody says, what harm's a little puff of a ciggy gonna do? The characters are still shown drinking, killing, being ritualistically sacrificed, empires fall, Gremio literally gets eaten alive by flesh-eating bacteria, but a bit of smoke and some pixelated blood is cold. What's going on? The fucking Japanese are ruining my Japanese games. One thing that people did actually criticize was the baffling use of the autosave, as when you enter a room with a save point, the game will save itself. Consider the following: I enter a room with a save, I know a boss is coming, I heal my dudes, and then I manually save, and now I have a continue point with fully healed boys. To achieve this same feat with the new system, I would have to enter the room, triggering the first save to get the notification, heal, leave, then re-enter the room for it to replace the base function. This adds extra steps, risking more random encounters, potentially undoing the healing, and the manual saves are closer to the next loading zone, requiring fewer steps. It's useless if you think about it on a surface level, and actively detrimental on any functional level, one of the worst implemented features I've ever seen, genuinely. Every game with autosave should have the option to disable it, as it's caused me far more grief in the past with corrupting my files, and I don't trust it as a result. While we're talking about map design, you'll notice how dungeons in Suikoden I HD adhere to their PS1 bounds. Genuinely, watch me move through these areas where the load zone is exactly where the edge of the screen used to be, despite having the extra terrain drawn in. Isn't that weird? It doesn't seem to happen in Suikoden II, as the maps are generally bigger than a single screen and scroll as a result. Oh, look at the timer on the video, there's 2 minutes left, what's he gonna say? Oh! A couple small things, Ain broke my chains, which was a pain in my aim, and finally, 30 frames a second is bad, and I don't like it. You can say that a low frame rate doesn't matter for a game like Suikoden, and there is a case for that, but playing it after the originals, it feels worse, especially in Suikoden II, where the movement was pretty tight. Also, try to focus on a background object at sub 60, you can't do it. That said, 30 can be a blessing in the Switch version, but I'm not going to blame the game for that, and I do enjoy spells not slowing down upon use. And obviously, you know, there are parts of this video which may age due to updates. It seems Konami is still actively patching the game, but I figure 4 months after release, the damage is already done. This is what we got. Anyway, I'm tired of talking. The goal of this video isn't to shit on Suikoden. It's a series I love. Having only played the first 2 games, I'd consider myself an expert and an authority. I am nothing if not the average Suikoden fan. I just wanted to document how a few of the selling points were oversold, and you shouldn't trust Konami or any video game publisher, nor the shills that orbit them. Actually, don't trust me either. Go verify for yourself. Bye!